The Illithids, more commonly known as the Mind Flayers, are a very alien species with a technology that makes complete and, most often, extremely unethical use of living organisms to create biomechanical items. In this video, we will have a closer look at this technology, from the many examples in the lore of Dungeons & Dragons to a few homebrew creations. First, there are many items you can find in Baldur's Gate 3, so let's take a closer look at that selection. From the very start of the game, you'll experience the way Illithid control consoles work and the way their impressive living vehicles are divided up into compartments, connected by muscular sphincter valves, so damage to or intrusion into the vessel can be prevented from spreading through the entire ship. But a little more on their living craft a bit later, starting with some small portable items that most often catch an adventurer's attention. The spiked bulb has a hard shell with rigid segments, very much like a sea urchin, though the spines protruding from it are more like shards of razor-sharp crystal. The insides of the bulb feel liquid, and some fungus leather cap seals what may have been the mouth of opening of a living urchin. It just seeps a sticky sap-like substance, as does the base of each of the spikes emerging from the shell. When thrown or otherwise cracked open, it explodes and fires shards out in all directions for 13 feet or 4 meters. While the damage is not severe, the lacerations from the spikes bleed profusely thanks to the sap coating them, and will not stop bleeding on their own, so unless medical attention or healing magic is applied, they can cause a victim to bleed to death. The caustic bulb might have been some kind of a barnacle, significantly mutated. Now it has the shell-like frame with soft fleshy sides and a sealed orifice. The whole thing seeps a thin layer of clear slime. When thrown or otherwise ruptured, the bulb sprays out a gout of caustic brine which covers a 10-foot or 3-meter area and any creature in that space. The brine has a pungent odor and radiates some heat from its chemical acid reaction, which will persist for quite some time until it completely oxidizes or is diluted and dispersed with quite a lot of water. The void bulb is a strange fungal sphere made of 6 tough and leathery mushroom heads tightly bound together. These are each infested with a mass of very potent parasites, possibly derived from highly modified rot grubs, which are mostly just highly charged neural tissue. They are visible from their lamprey-like mouth openings that look more like suction cups dotting evenly on every part of the sphere, and these expand and contract rhythmically as if breathing. When thrown at a target, they violently disturbed parasites attempt to latch onto anything they can, causing telekinetic damage to the point of impact and anything or anyone within a 20-foot or 6-meter radius, which will get telekinetically sucked towards that point of impact. It's very strong, easily able to hurl a group of adult humans together in a split second. Thankfully, that's as long as the effect lasts. The resonance stone is a form of charged psionic crystal, very rarely occurring on the primaterial plane. Psi crystals are often sourced from locations and from within the bodies of creatures native to the astral plane, or one of the countless dimensions accessible from there, even from the bodies of beings called elementals within their chaotic realms of existence. The resonance stone is an artificial constructed based on real psychic crystal which glows with a warm and soft violet light. The stone is housed in a biomechanical walker body based on the intellect devourer and weighs around 11 pounds or 5 kilograms. Its sole purpose is to radiate positive and blissful emotions to any humanoid within 30 feet or 9 meters, who then becomes much more mentally compliant to anything commanding them with psionic powers. After the effect ends, the victims of it will know that they were under the psychic influence of the stone immediately. Nautiloid tanks are containers that store and filter a vivid purple briny fluid that is highly flammable, much like a form of fuel. This liquid is used in a significant number of the biomechanical systems which the Illithids create. There is no doubt that the fluid has some interfacing effect when in contact with neural tissue, but a human could immerse their whole body in this stuff without it having much effect other than feeling very wet and slippery. However, touch a lit torch to any part of it and it will ignite like gasoline. Illithid habitats are dank, dark, and uncomfortably warm. The air reeks of formaldehyde, which smells a lot like strong pickles, plus all sorts of noxious organic scents from both inside and outside of bodies, both alive and dead. While it seems like a place teeming with bacteria and disease, it's actually very sterile as long as nothing from the numerous tanks, flasks and tubes is spilled out accidentally. The lithids keep most of their workspaces meticulously neat and tidy, but they don't think in terms of straight lines and perfect even symmetries like we do. So to most humanoids, the architecture is best described as organic, twisted, slimy and confusing. Illithid's psychic senses guide them far better than any olfactory sense, so to them the various parts of their lair can be identified by the moods and often cyclic thoughts bubbling away in living components that were once part of some intact creature. The Mind Flayers will graft actual eyeballs into rib-like support arches that act like their own closed-circuit TV system. They use digestive containers for recycling organic bits they no longer need. They have modified creatures mutated in order to replicate the functions of laboratory gyros, microscopes. They can even build special extraction tools for when there are a lot of brains to remove from craniums and they just don't have the time to do it themselves. They will hand this bony helmet to an enslaved minion to shove it onto the head of a captive. The extraction of a brain takes only a few moments and automatically plops the brain into a containment jar full of mysterious fluid. There's more on this item at the end of this video, by the way. There is a very limited, slight chance anyone familiar with this illithid technology could use the device to reverse engineer the process, but it's not designed for healing, and some sort of divine healing spell would be immediately required before the brain and body die from the massive trauma to those unskilled. Illithids have numerous ways of keeping living tissue healthy and disease-free, including a complete and functional brain, even when it has been removed from a body and stored in a transparent flask of cerebrospinal fluid with no sensory organs attached. They have all sorts of methods to keep the mind occupied with fantasies and vivid hallucinations. A brain floating in a big jar connected to some interface may converse with those who ask it questions, with no idea it's not still living its old life. Sometimes confronting a mind in this state with the truth of the situation is such a horrific shock it can cause the brain to go into a catatonic, uncommunicative state. But most of the time, the mind will simply refuse to believe the terrible truth in favor of a much more comfortable lie. When it comes to their use of other life forms, it's very important to understand that the illithids have absolutely no sense of real compassion or mercy. While they can probe and examine everything another mind thinks, feels and remembers, they savor the emotions as we would enjoy a box of assorted chocolates. They're flavors, but also each is a tool that they use to get other organisms to do what they want them to do. It's not just chemistry and brain tissue to them. They can be very poetic and have many more words for different emotional states in their language than we do, but the illithids are not emotional beings. They are cold, calculating intellects who see their kind as the apex and every other form of life as just a tool for them to use. They do have deeply held beliefs and a couple of gods, though their deity in Ilsensine is precisely what you would expect, an etheric, glowing manifestation of supreme intelligence without moral or ethical restraint of any kind, utterly sure of the ultimate superiority of itself and by extension all illithid kind, who are just extensions of itself after all. Mind Flayers are mad scientists. They see living organisms as superior to machines, so prefer to use living constructs where they can, whenever resources are available. Their colonies are well-organized biomechanical laboratories and production facilities, similar to the Borg from Star Trek, except rather than focus on replacement and enhancement with machine parts, they will harvest superior organic components from one organism and replicate them, modify them, implanting them in test subjects and upgrading their enslaved minions. They rarely modify their own body permanently this way, so creating devices they can slip on that operate symbiotically is their preference. It speaks to their innate drive to dominate other life forms. The Mind Flayers would say, why do something yourself when you can easily command some lesser being to do the work for you, while you continue your great work of bringing proper control and direction to all life in the multiverse. Two common aspects of Mind Flayer equipment are that they are non-magical and that they have many of the properties of living creatures. So while knowledge of arcana can be useful in determining what a device does, a knowledge of medicine is better suited for figuring out how the devices work. A deep understanding of nature is just going to give you the intellectual heebie-jeebies. For operating in hostile environments, the Mind Flayers create a carapace-like survival mantle that encloses portions of the wearer's chest, neck and shoulders. It functions as a non-magical half-plate armor that takes about the same time to put on and remove. The survival mantle must be worn close to the skin. It won't work over other kinds of armor, and while equipped, it provides full respiration protection, even within the vacuum of space, though it won't protect from extremes of heat or cold, or things like acidic environments. But more advanced survival suits can be created using the survival mantle as the basic frame and interface. While the Mind Flayers don't often permanently implant modifications within their bodies, the Illithids have no hesitation doing so to their minions. One common type are flensing claws, which take a form of articulated digit that extend into long metal blades. The claws are custom made for that specific creature, then knitted into the flesh and bones of the creature's limbs, and can't be removed without surgical amputation. The Illithids also graft things like a tail with a stinger, prehensile tentacles, thick plates of skin, bone and shell, delicate sensory hairs, olfactory organs, muscle tissue, and etc. Now, I mentioned I would talk about their transport technology in the Nautiloid ships. Mind Flayers originated in the far future. Faced with the imminent demise of their kind, they fled to the past with their elder brain leaders, plus certain ferocious and twisted creatures that inhabited their homeworld, as well as numerous spacefaring ships. So we have the odd situation in that the oldest of the Nautiloid ships are by far the most advanced, and the ship you see in the game Baldur's Gate 3 is one of those ancient living vessels, packed with biomechanical technology and an engine core called a helm, capable of making dimensional jumps. That is a technology that the present-day Illithids of Toril don't know how to replicate just yet, but they are working on it, because they know for a fact that they will eventually work it out. Aside from extremely rare artifacts like that remaining from the leap back in time from the far future, most Nautiloid ships are mere replicas of those designs made with formed resins. They have yet to discover the planet that the giant snail creatures came from that they modified to make their living vessels, so they form the shell shape and decks out of wood-like resins, not the 3-inch thick crystal and chitin plates of the originals. They have limited biomechanical systems, so need to keep more crew to operate the ship, but they fly fairly well and can operate on or even underwater if need be. The standard design is around 100 feet in length. The original living vessel only needed a skeleton crew of 5 Mind Flayers to operate the entire ship, but modern Nautiloids need 10 to 15 and keep a stock of slaves with a total crew of no more than 35. The rubbery tentacles at the front of the ship are packed with organic sensors that the Flayers use for navigation and sensing living beings at a great distance from the ship. In order to create new ships, the Mind Flayers are forced to deal with a species called the Arcane. I have a video about them. Though the device is called transponders, which allow the ships to travel from one plane of existence to another, which you see in the game, are not something the Arcane sell, as far as I know, so they might be some ancient advanced tech the Flayers have recovered knowledge of how to create. There are only a few of these ships on Toril though, but a lot more on other planets. It's pretty important to point out that in the Realm solar system, the 6th planet named Glyph is a bastion of the Illithid species, and from the planet's the surface of the planet Toril, where the continent of Faerun is located, when looking at it through a telescope, it looks like a dull grey orb surrounded by a spectacular ring and orbited by 3 moons. It's not a pleasant planet. 80% of the surface is land, burnt by the Mind Flayers to make it harder for other species to hide from them. The remaining 20% of the surface is covered in a strange gelatinous substance that can be eaten and is as refreshing as water, but it's very weird. Thanks to the Mind Flayers burning of all the forests, the atmosphere dumps harmful acid rain on the surface. Meanwhile, underground, there are several Mind Flayer cities in a constant state of expansion and construction. The Flayers hollowed out one of the moons called Haven. It's a neutral meeting place for the rival Illithid factions, a hub of trade and diplomacy that is also the main base for their security force, so you'll find a lot of squid ships active there at any time. There is another moon called Megabwe, which is habitable, but there's only one settlement, which is fairly welcoming to visitors. It's just a few inns, trading posts and stuff, and hardy folk who survive in the bitter cold on the native edible plants and insect life. But water is scarce and no other animals are native to the moon. It has its own little moon called Paluta, which is just an asteroid. And Megabwe itself is only 50 miles in diameter, so gravity is fun. The moon orbits a gap within the rings surrounding Lith, which are vast when you fly around them and within them. Mostly chunks of ice closer to the planet and more rocky spokes radiating out further away from the surface by thousands of miles. The Mind Flayers found on Toril came to the planet from Glyph around 12,500 years ago in their Nautiloid ships and founded the city named Aurindal within a vast cavern called the Darklands in the deep Underdark, what many call the Lower Dark, way down beneath the Dragon Coast, portions of the Auronson Mountains and Termish and Chesenta. Basically, if you look at the whole area of the Shining Plains in the Vilhon Reach, it's right under there, 26 miles deep. It's a really massive cavern with its own weather, and one of the major cities of the Duergar or dwarves named Dunsperin. The Illithids settled there because it's the holy site of their god Ilsensine, and they were locked in a war with the Shanatar dwarves for around 4,000 years. The reason the Duergar exist today is because of that conflict, and they were the race that eventually put a stop to it, more or less. Anyway, I could go on at length about Mind Flayer history, but it's a fascinating subject. We're here for their technology, though. Mind Flayers are a species of extremely intelligent overlords. They keep enslaved slaves around them most of the time, so like any smart person who has a racial history of having their slaves revolt and steal all their stuff and use against them, they routinely make sure that their devices are useless in the hands of anyone other than those the devices were specifically created for. What I have been detailing up to this point have been generic sorts of equipment that are intended for anyone to grab and make use of, such as the various grenade bulbs, the emergency survival carapace, harmless technical equipment like laboratory tools and door valves, but everything else is very difficult for any unauthorized person to use. They are keyed to biosignatures, code-locked via psychic commands, paired with specific genetic markers, and so on. This is basic technology for a species that makes very heavy use of biomechanics. The Illithids would love nothing more than getting their hands on a bunch of high-ranking modrons and taking them apart molecule by molecule to study everything about them. So let's take a look at a few examples of this technology. Come join me down on the showroom floor. The self-replicating hive rifle called the Zaun El-Kwa Quiloth, which translates as Psychic Swarm Harbinger in the Illithid language, is a biomechanical masterpiece of Illithid engineering, a symbiotic entity crafted from the chitin of aberrant creatures infused with psychoreactive crystals. The rifle hosts a living, breeding colony of psychic wasps, each one a tiny construct of interwoven organic and crystalline components, possessing rudimentary psychic abilities allowing them to home in on the neural signatures of living targets. The rifle seems to pulsate with an eerie life of its own. A surface is a labyrinth of intertwining carapaces and crystal formations. It's studded with bioluminescent nodes that shed a dim, unsettling light, giving glimpses of the restless, swirling swarm within. The wasps it fires are carriers of a potent neurotoxin and also act as psychic homing devices, relentlessly pursuing their targets. The neurotoxin is a concoction designed to induce excruciating pain and amplifying neural activity, making the victim's mind a beacon for other Illithid devices or creatures. The hive rifle possesses a self-sustaining, self-replicating ecosystem within, and the components absorbed from the environment and the remnants of its prey, allowing it to reproduce more wasps continually. The modified ooze drones, called the Sluk Inthar Morif, which means stealth tadpole carrier, are engineered from various species of oozes and are designed as stealthy infiltrators in delivery systems for Illithid tadpoles. These drones resemble large translucent blobs, their gelatinous bodies interspersed with faintly glowing sinew strands and pulsating membranous sacs containing the Illithid tadpoles. They move with a silent undulating motion, able to squeeze through the smallest openings and adhere to almost any surface, allowing them to traverse complex environments undetected. When the ooze is in proximity to a potential host, it exudes a tendril to engulf the host's head, delivering a strong paralytic chemical and then depositing an Illithid tadpole. The tadpole then seeks entry into the host, preferably through orifices such as the mouth or nose, to begin its parasitic life cycle. The ooze can alter its refractive properties to become nearly invisible and can secrete corrosive enzymes to deter attackers or dissolve obstacles in its path. Each ooze is semi-intelligent, but they are always bonded to one Illithid master controller who links with it telepathically for remote command and monitoring. So even when not creating new hosts, it has many uses as a stealth infiltrator. The astral leech, called the Uranast Enthrak, is a marvel of illithid engineering. The creature is mostly ethereal, tethered to the material plane through strands of astral essence. Its primary function is to attach the souls of creatures, draining their life essence, while sending invaluable energy and information back to its illithid masters. Its form is shifting, fluid, and translucent, appearing like a spectral leech with tendrils reaching different planes of existence. When deployed, it instinctively seeks out the most spiritually potent entities, enveloping them in its astral tendrils and slowly leeching away their vitality, leaving the host as a drained, lifeless husk. Not good news for clerics. The Soul Cage helm, called the Suqualor Myth, is a meticulously crafted piece of biotechnology, its exterior appearing as a seamless amalgamation of chitinous material adorned with pulsating psychic crystals. It's designed to trap its wearer's soul, preventing any escape even after death. The helm emits a dim, eerie light as it binds the soul within, its energy being harnessed by the illithids for various dark purposes. The wearer's body becomes a mere puppet, a shell, controlled by the dark will of the illithid, trapped souls screaming in silent agony, witnessed only by the cruel, insatiable minds of the Mind Flayers. The cerebral siphon pod, called the Cereuleth Fiar, is a grotesque creation that resembles a pulsating organic pod, a myriad of slimy tentacles snaking out, seeking the thoughts and memories of those nearby. It's used to extract and store the mental essence of creatures, the illithid's twisted equivalent of a memory bank. When a suitable host is found, the tendrils pierce the cranium, painlessly siphoning the cerebral content. The extracted information is stored in a crystalline core, where it can be accessed and analysed by the illithids. The host is left an empty vessel, a blank slate devoid of thoughts and memories, with little use except for feeding the illithids more monstrous and predatory minions. The psycho-reactive mycelium injector, called the Cymagwell, is a symbiotic fusion of a fungal organisms and biomechanical components designed to alter the mental state of its targets. The injector resembles a large living syringe, its needle composed of a hardened razor-sharp mycelium strand. When activated, it injects a concoction of psychoactive spores and enzymes directly into the host's brain. The injected entity experiences vivid hallucinations, altered perceptions, and heightened psychic sensitivity, becoming a beacon of psychic energy easily manipulated and consumed by the illithids. The injector has a will, subtly influencing its carrier to seek out fresh minds ripe for infection. And here is one inspired by Josephi on my Discord server. Feel free to use this in your next campaign because it's a doozy. The Mind Extractor Crown, called the Tivon El Lar Josephi, is a highly sophisticated illithid technology initially conceived as a convenient tool for the minions to harvest brains unharmed for their masters. This grotesque helmet, adorned with sharp silver tendrils and pulsating mauve crystals, operates with intricate precision, removing the brain without a trace of damage. The intricate device, with its bony, chitinous structure, clasps securely around the cranium of its host. Once activated, the filaments penetrate the skull, enveloping the brain in a spectral field and extracting it with surgical precision. The brain, pulsating with residual thoughts and life, is then encased in a container filled with a preservation fluid mimicking cerebrospinal fluid, maintaining vitality and function. A band of artificers associated with the heretical cult of Thune managed to reverse engineer the device. They discovered how to safely return the brain to its original body and transplant it into different bodies or even biomechanical containers. This groundbreaking modification allows the transfer of consciousness, memories, and essence from one entity to another, effectively granting immortality to those willing to traverse from body to body. Illithids, upon discovering this modification, saw its immense potential and decided to replicate it, appreciating its expanded utility and versatility. The cult of Thune has clandestinely used the device to completely change their humanoid agents' identities. These agents, loyal to their enigmatic masters, have exploited this technology to expand their lifespans indefinitely, shifting their consciousness from one vessel to the next across the centuries. These agents are called the Tavor Emor. Thankfully, illithids' brains can't be transferred using this device, but they have dabbled with the concept. I uncovered a lot of resources checking and researching for this article. There's some more information on exactly what you can harvest off an illithid body and the prices you can get for it and who to sell it to if you're interested. Just let me know in the comment section down below. Feel free to add your own inventions and innovations in the comment section to help enhance the collective lore of the Mind Flayers for the greater good. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.